My name is Michelle Nyhouse. I'm an environmental journalist, a contributing editor at High Country News, and the author of a book called Beloved Beasts about the history of the modern conservation movement. It's really a joy to be here and get to see and listen to these conversations taking place across international boundaries. I wish there were more meetings like this. It's my pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Christine Peterson, your moderator for this session. Christine has covered wildlife, the environment, and outdoor recreation as a journalist in Wyoming and across the West for almost 20 years. First for the Casper Star Tribune, and then as a full-time freelancer. She has written for National Geographic, The Atlantic, Outside, Outdoor Life, many other publications, and I've had the pleasure of editing her wonderful stories for High Country News about prairie dogs, deer migration, and many other pressing issues facing large landscapes. Christine is also the past president of the Outdoor Writers Association of America and a current fellow of the Alicia Patterson Foundation. Christine.
Thank you, Michelle. That was so kind. She's the best. I really appreciate Temple and the Hobb School for putting this on. What an amazing event. I've gone to a lot of wildlife conferences over the years, though not nearly as many as I'm sure all of you have. And this has really been an incredible experience so far. As Michelle said, I'm an outdoor journalist and have covered wildlife and the environment for a whole bunch of years. And it's easy, especially as a journalist, to highlight only the places of conflict, only the things that, if it bleeds, it leads. And indeed, I have done a lot of that. I've written some of my most read stories for High Country News or The Atlantic. Outdoor Life have been about prairie dogs, which eat a lot of grass and dig a lot of holes, but are also really critical to big, intact ecosystems, functional ecosystems, or the conflict between our need to go outside and be outside and explore the outdoors, and how wildlife maybe don't thrive so well when we are embracing our need to go outside and explore the outdoors. And these often feel intractable, even solutionless. But even skeptical journalists like me can see that there is always some sort of solution out there, especially when we're willing to come together and sit down and talk and listen to each other. And those solutions come from across the globe, as we've heard so far, and we're only partway through, which is amazing. So this panel, which is really going to focus on conflict and then on solutions, is going to take you from out our back door here, where, as you heard from Dan and other speakers, that we have wolves and grizzly bears and mountain lions and black bears and coyotes, and they roam freely, often unnoticed until they're really, really noticed. And then we'll go all the way around the globe. Our panelists will tell you about the problems they've seen and walk you through on the ground solutions. And there are a number of them, and they all have amazing things to say. So I'm going to wrap up my comments and start us off with Lesli Allison. Lesli is a founding member and chief executive of the Western Landowners Alliance. She was also a founding member of the Chama Peak Land Alliance. For the past 3 decades, Lesli has worked extensively with private landowners and multiple stakeholders to advance conservation, sustain working lands, and support rural communities. Prior to Western Landowners Alliance, Lesli managed a large ranch in the southern San Juan Mountains of Colorado. And during her 16-year tenure, she implemented progressive conservation management through award-winning programs in restoration forestry, prescribed fire, grazing, stream restoration, hunting and wildlife management, and scientific research and monitoring. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lesli.
Well, good Lord, what a lineup of speakers to have to follow. Today's speakers really have actually revived my faith in the conservation movement. So thank all of you who've gone before, and you're going to hear some repetition, which I think is actually a great thing. So briefly, just want to introduce the Western Landowners Alliance. We are a West-wide landowner-led, landowner-founded organization Our mission statement is to sustain working lands, connected landscapes, and native species. We have about 14,000 members, most of whom are landowners. They come from every walk of life, every political persuasion, every kind of land interest. But the thing that unites us is our love of the land and a dedication to keeping it whole and healthy for the benefit of people and wildlife. I would like to also just call out some of our Wyoming board members. We're West-wide. We've got about 30 people on staff scattered around the West. And our Wyoming board members include Valerie Gordon, who you heard from earlier today. I don't know if Valerie is still here, raise your hand. And then we have Marissa Taylor, Bob Budd, Marianne Dingus, and Chris Robinson are all Wyoming board members. So I really had to stop and think about what I wanted to say here today, and I'm going to try to make this quick because I'm definitely going to run over time and have to get nudged off. But there are important things that need to be said. Many of them have been said today. I want to underscore them, but these are essential to saving the places that we love. The first point is that private and working lands are incredibly important. These are the lands that are actively managed by people for our own needs, for our own interests, for a variety of purposes. And yet these lands, particularly the private lands, have somewhat been the stepchild of the conservation movement. And yet most lands in the continental United States are in private ownership and under private stewardship. And here in the American West, at least one study finds that private lands are biologically more productive than public lands by an order of magnitude. And there's a good reason for that. It's because people always settled the best places first, and those passed into private ownership. And these are the places that have the fertile valley bottoms, the good soils, the timber, the wildlife, and they're habitable year-round. And of course, they have the water as well. The majority of wildlife depend on these same lands as we do, and for the same reasons. Here in the Greater Yellowstone, as in other places, private lands are essential to sustaining these big game populations in the wildlife migration corridors that we've talked about a lot today. But it's also important to come back to the fact that these lands also sustain people. They're essential to our own survival. They provide our food, our fiber, our shelter, and the energy that we need. They support livelihoods and rural economies. They support hunting and fishing and other kinds of recreation. And they're essential to our future and to our children's future and to our national security. And yet these lands are under immense pressure and they're disappearing. And so that's the first thing I want to share with you. And these things are important as an underpinning of what we'll talk about here next. The second thing is that the reason that these lands are disappearing is really about economics. We have an economic system that rewards some things and not others. And the thing that is least rewarded in our economic system is caring for the natural world. As consumers and taxpayers, we'll pay for houses and food and roads and energy and entertainment and cosmetics, but not so much for nature. And this is because we take nature for granted. We assume that it is an abundant, self-sustaining resource to which we are simply entitled by birthright. And because we do not prioritize it economically, we are losing it. So when we talk about improving the economics of working lands, we're talking about our collective future, including the future of wildlife. And while some measure of regulation will always be necessary, this fundamental economic problem cannot be cured by regulation. Economics will trump regulation, and there's no pun intended there. The economic problem must be cured with an economic solution. In other words, we have to level the economic playing field. We can never buy it all into public ownership. And even if we did, we couldn't afford to manage it, and it would be a poor choice for a variety of other reasons. Instead, we have to make keeping land open and healthy economically competitive with the alternatives. And land needs to be able to support reasonable livelihoods, or else only the wealthiest will be able to afford the land. And as Dr. Jala just pointed out, having middle-income families on the land yields the best results for biodiversity. It also supports healthy rural communities and economies. The third thing that we need to understand is that stewardship is the overlooked and most important leg of the conservation stool. When people talk about conservation, they usually talk about preservation and restoration. Stewardship is the active care and daily management of land and natural resources to ensure their health and productivity into the future. It means managing our forests and rangelands and croplands, not just for food and fiber, but for their full range of values, including clean water and wildlife and a healthy climate. When there is good stewardship, the need for preservation and restoration diminishes. And in fact, protection without stewardship is incomplete. Human stewardship in these landscapes must be included and supported as an essential component of conservation. But this requires investment. Like nature, it's not something we can take for granted or regulate into being. Most of us who own and manage land, we care very deeply about it. We have a land ethic. But caring for land requires knowledge and science, skilled labor, supportive public policies, and a supportive culture. And above all, it must be economically feasible. And the fourth and final thing it's important to know is that despite the economic hardships and despite the politics of the day, despite these things, there are incredibly wonderful things going on across the West between landowners and their communities and environmental advocates. There is a tremendous movement of collaborative conservation, and it holds the seeds to a successful future. And this is the great untold story of the West. It's about ranchers bringing back endangered species on purpose, sustaining our big game populations and improving watersheds. It's about farmers rebuilding soils and learning how to grow food in better ways in collaboration with their communities. And it's amazing what can happen and how good it can feel when we work with people rather than against them. And so here's an example right here in Wyoming. And this is some of the collaboration that's happening. So I want to talk about an example that's happening right here in Wyoming. And I'm going to talk about elk instead of wolves and grizzlies first, because when you ask most ranchers what the biggest conflict is on the landscape, they'll tell you, you know, wolves and grizzlies are bad, but the elk, it's the elk. So we're going to talk about elk as a starting point. So the way normally wildlife migration corridor conservation happens is this. So this is a typical Western landscape. You've got this intermingling of public and private lands. And somebody identifies a wildlife corridor. Maybe it's Arthur, and maybe it's the guys at the Wyoming Migration Initiative, thanks to all of their great work. But it's a process that's led by scientists, NGOs, and government agencies. And then the first thing people want to do is protect the corridor. So you start identifying threats to the corridor. And again, it's the same folks involved usually in that conversation. How do we protect the corridors? And these are the threats that are usually identified. And then a plan gets made to protect the corridor from those threats. And we talk about housing development restrictions, land use codes, things like we've heard about today, road crossings restrictions, wildlife-friendly fencing, grazing restrictions, energy development restrictions. And the plan is presented to the public for comment. And of course, the land use restrictions are proposed, and people talk about needing funding for conservation easements and wildlife-friendly fencing and things like that, but often that funding doesn't actually materialize in any substance. And the result is that you have ranchers and industry protesting these regulations. So what if instead we started with a different approach? What if instead we started by asking, why are wildlife using this corridor to begin with? What's going right? And in this case, here in Wyoming, what's going right is large intact pieces of private land with low public pressure and economic activity, such as ranching, that supports these livelihoods and keeping these lands open while leaving room for wildlife. So what if we asked, how can we support what's working rather than tackling the threats? And all of a sudden, a whole new toolbox begins to open up. And it starts with engaging the landowners first and not last, providing meaningful funding, providing conservation programs and technical assistance, and sustained support for place-based collaborative conservation. And importantly, economic benefits for keeping these corridors intact. And this is the toolkit that emerges from that. And it's the opposite of conflict. This is about partnership. It's about honoring and recognizing the people that are already out there on the land, already stewarding it, already keeping it open, and leveraging their investments and their willingness to keep these corridors intact. And so that's exactly what happened when we started the USDA Wyoming Big Game Partnership. Wyoming took this approach to conserving corridors here. Oh, okay. And we brought together USDA funding. I know we skipped a slide here, but anyway, the USDA brought funding, the state of Wyoming brought funding, NGOs brought funding and capacity, philanthropic supporters brought funding. We all came together and said, let's support the people on the working lands who are supporting these wildlife corridors. And one of the key tools that we brought forward was habitat leasing under a program that's called the Grasslands Conservation Reserve Program. It's a federal program we adapted for this purpose in the last Farm Bill. And we had tremendous success. And, you know, Brian mentioned earlier, Brian Yablonsky mentioned like it's bad to talk about, bring a map into a public meeting. Well, it has been. But what this did, by making it positive to be in one of those corridors, is it made it possible not only to bring that map in the room, but we had ranchers calling up and saying, hey, how come I'm not on that map? I'd like to be in that priority zone. So we really can change it when we make it an incentive-based instead of a regulatory-based approach. And these are some of the results from the USDA Wyoming Big Game Partnership to date. A lot of acres under conservation, a lot of collaboration and community engagement. So anyway, that's one approach. Let's start by working with what's working, start by supporting people who are on the landscape and bringing meaningful economic support to sustain these habitats. But then what about wolves and grizzlies, right? Maybe a harder topic. And as it was earlier mentioned, as these populations expand, so do the conflicts, and there are no easy solutions to this. But through years of dialogue and collaboration between producers and wildlife advocates and state wildlife agencies and researchers, an approach has emerged that can help improve outcomes. We have a thing called the Conflict Reduction Consortium that Western Landowners Alliance facilitates, brings all these people together into monthly dialogue, and a lot of cool stuff has come out of that. And one of the things that's come out of that is what we call the 4 Cs. And this sounds a little bit, I don't know, academic or something. I didn't like it when I first heard it, but actually it's really come to be an important tool. And what this really stands for is conflict prevention, compensation, control, and collaboration. And when these things go together in one toolkit, you actually have some possibility of making things work on the landscape for both people and wildlife. And I'll explain it. So conflict prevention starts with this. You'd like to avoid the conflict in the first place, right? But that can be expensive. Range riding is expensive. All the non-lethal methods are expensive. So we need to provide support for landowners to avoid the conflicts in the first place. When they do experience depredation, we need meaningful compensation for that so that they can stay in business and stay out on the land. We need control. So when we have chronic depredation, we do need to be able to go in strategically and remove that animal. And that means lethal control in many cases, but that should be selective, right? And then finally, collaboration. And when you have all those things together, you can kind of start to make things work out. When any one is missing, it doesn't work and conflict increases. And I'm out of time, so I'm not going to walk you through this little wonky thing here. But basically, this is a decision guide that we put together to help policymakers and wildlife advocates think about how policies on wildlife conservation impact the economics of private lands and private land habitats, so that we're always asking the question, does this policy hurt or help the economics of keeping these habitats intact and healthy? So, and with that, I will wrap up because I'm out of time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lesli. That was really interesting. Next up, we have Ester Borgioli. Close. She is an Italian conservation specialist with experience across marine and terrestrial ecosystems. She holds a bachelor's in marine biology and a master's in marine science, conservation, and innovation While her academic background is rooted in marine sciences, Esther chose to broaden her path into terrestrial conservation and human-wildlife coexistence, driven by a passion to diversify her experience and explore new dimensions of biodiversity protection. She works at the Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation as coordinator of the Human Wildlife Initiative, a program that finances and supports projects promoting coexistence between biodiversity and human activities in France, Spain, and Switzerland. Since its launch, the initiative has supported over 60 projects and is guided by a steering committee that brings together hunters, farmers, NGOs, scientists, and public authorities. She's now working to expand the initiative on a wider scale across Mediterranean regions to maximize its impact in new areas. Esther, I'll let you take it from here.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Temple, for inviting me today. I'm starting with the questions for the audience. I don't know if you might know this gentleman here on the right on a horse. I know that some of you know. Yes, that's right. So more than a century ago, Prince Albert I traveled all the way from France to Wyoming on a hunting trip with Buffalo Bill. Today, his great-great-grandson is continuing his legacy in a very different way by leading international efforts for the protection of biodiversity through its foundation in Monaco. I would like to show you where Monaco is. I don't know if you know, but it's a very, very small country, an independent country. It's 2.5 kilometers long, and it's between France and Italy. It's very small, but there are a lot of things going on other than the Formula One. For example, there is the Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation. So the foundation has been created in 2006 by the prince himself, and is one of a kind foundation because we don't represent any politics, any lobby, and we bring together people that usually don't talk to each other, like scientists, governments, and private partners. And because our president, the prince, is also the head of state, we can put sensitive issues on a political stage while staying independent at the same time. So let me take you to the ocean for a second. I know we're in a terrestrial environment, but this is a very nice example of a success story that we had. So in 2006, the bluefin tuna stocks were about to collapse. And it had only 2 years left. So the prince was like, okay, let's do something. So in 2008, together with the foundation, Monaco was the first country to ban bluefin tuna in restaurants. And after a couple of years, the foundation and the Monaco pushed to put the bluefin tuna fishing to the CITES, which is the international trade. But the proposal was rejected. But this gave a huge global visibility. So governments were pushed somehow to cut quotas and tackle illegal fishing. And finally, after 10 years later, the stock of bluefish tuna quadrupled size. And this is how, this is an example of how a natural foundation like ours can influence international policy. So this is not really about fish. It's about how a foundation backed by a head of state can push difficult topics into the political stage. And this is the same strength that we would like to bring to the challenge of large predators in Europe. So let's go back to land again. As a lot of you know, some of these predators, they come back naturally, like the wolves from Italy to France. And thanks to conservation success, now they're doing great. So they're not endangered like the bluefin tuna. They're doing great, but it also brings new challenges, especially for the people that live alongside them. Unlike the US, in Europe, I don't know if many of you have been, but the space is very, very limited. So we have to share the same space, people and animals. And the biggest challenge is that all these animals are transboundary. So one season they can be in Italy, they can go to Germany, or they can end up in Belgium and kill the European Commission's President Pony. So it wasn't very nice for that wolf right there. And also one of the biggest challenges that every country, they have their own way of dealing politics. They have different laws. They have other ways of monitoring data. So it's quite uneven. And what is missing right now in Europe is missing really like a cross-border coordination where everyone, so hunters, NGOs, conservationists, and local people can share the same space and they can be all happy together. So how can we make this collaboration happen? We at the foundation, we have an example. So we have another initiative, which is called the Monk Ciel Alliance, and it's a perfect model of collaborative philanthropy because many years ago, some private foundations like ours, they came all together and they were like, okay, we would like to work all together on helping the endangered species, the monk seal, recover in Greece. So they put together private funds and they started to work together with local communities, with governments, and with NGOs. And this model really worked. So this is an example that if we pool all the resources that we have, us as private foundations, if we coordinate the strategy, then at the end we can have a long-term impact. So us as donors, we don't just give money, but we can actually be the corridor of coordinating strategy. And this is why years ago, in 2020, we created the Human Wildlife Initiative. So at some point, the foundation looked at their portfolio and they were like, wait a second, we are financing coexistence projects in Thailand, in China, in Kenya, but we're doing anything in our neighboring areas where the wolf problem is it's a problem. So we created this initiative in a pilot in the south of France. And until now, in 2025, we span the initiative in Spain and the French-speaking part of Switzerland, and we finance more than 60 projects. The thing that is unique about the initiative is that we have a very diversified steering committee. So as you heard about my biography, I studied marine biology, so I'm not really a specialist like some people here in the panel. So we have a diversified steering committee that help us select the projects that we receive. And we created a steering committee that is quite unique because we have hunters, we have the agricultural chambers, we have NGOs, and we have also a wildlife vet. So everyone is giving their own opinion, given their different background. These are some of the projects that we've been financing so far. So at the moment, we were focusing on some categories that goes from agriculture to outdoor sports to science and research and awareness and sensibilization. So we had some projects right there on the left where we created resting zones for a specific type of bird in a ski resort, or we're putting deterrent collars on livestock so to be a non-lethal method against wolves. Or down here, we had a couple of students from Paris that they hiked from France to Switzerland and to Italy, asking farmers what they were thinking about the comeback of the wolves. And also we do some research. This is a project focusing on looking at the wolf diet, so to see what kind of diet they have based on the level of the mountain. So just to let also the hunters know, hey, you're hunting too many boars. At this level of the mountain, we need boars for the wolves, so they're not attacking any more livestock. So they're very, very broad. And as you saw, we're not just working with large predators at the moment, but we're having like all sorts of wildlife. And then we thought about what can we do to maximize our impact? We have a strong potential because we saw that we're financing solutions, innovative solution, but to apply the lessons that we saw from the Bluefin Tuna and the Monk Seal Alliance, I think the initiative has a strong potential to leverage the initiative, and why we don't put all of the funding and all of our energy to give a voice to large predators in Europe, and then at the same time kind of covering all the other species like an umbrella, and using the prince and his voice to actually bring to the table topics that are very politically sensitive and very socially contested. And this is why I'm doing a call for action for safeguarding large carnivores through collaboration, and I would like to say, and not through legislation, because through the foundation, it can act as a catalyst. So we saw that how the foundation can bring other philanthropist foundation all together and build coalitions also with other type of stakeholders. It can help cross-border cooperation. It can help collaborative pressure. So we have the farmers that they care about their livestock, but at the same time, there are hunters that they want to compete for their game. And then we have local communities that are afraid of bears walking through the roads in their small villages in Italy. So I think we have a really good potential to join forces for a long-lasting impact and actually put our funding in long-lasting projects and not small projects. So at the end, also for me, when it comes to reporting, I can actually see that a project had an impact. And so this is the way that we're trying to go with the initiative right now for the next 5 years, hoping other foundations in Europe or maybe in America are interested in this program. And I would like to add that the foundation is launching every year a Camp Monaco Prize. So we give $100,000 to Yellowstone-related projects in collaboration with the Buffalo Bill Center. So I see the potential. I'm very positive about the impact that we can have. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Esther. The next speaker is Harrison Carter. Harrison is an interdisciplinary conservation biologist and storyteller, exploring innovative ways to incentivize human-wildlife coexistence in some of the world's most extraordinary places. He has traveled and filmed in over 20 countries worldwide, and his expeditions include traversing the Guianese jungle, Indonesian rainforests, and Indian lowlands in search of the world's most infamous wildlife and the stories of neighboring communities. Harrison started his career in investment banking and later management consultancy, developing skills that now inform his research with a focus on innovative approaches to incentivize coexistence. Harrison?
Super. Thank you so much, everyone, for having me here today. I think just before kicking off, I just first wanted to recognize and thank you the amazing Indigenous leadership we've had the privilege of listening to this morning. I also had the privilege of listening to it yesterday, really being inspired by a different perspective that I'm not amazingly exposed to in my day-to-day work, and it really helps challenge how we think through these solutions. It would be a false economy. I'm about to go and talk about economy, but it would be a false economy to think we can develop without really enhancing or reconnecting our relationship to nature. But also to thank Temple and Jake for bringing me out here, bringing us all together. I've been to a number of conferences this year that really haven't brought together such an amazing interdisciplinary group to discuss these really complicated issues. So let's begin. Alongside Amy Dickman and Joe Ball, I head up our Incentivizing Conservation Working Group at WildCRU at Oxford. And today I'm going to be talking a little bit about innovation at the small or localized project scale, innovation at the financial scale, hang on, because this is all going to sound quite good after a few slides, and there are problems everywhere, and then what we can do about it. And I'm really grateful for Ben talking about the ecosystem with a photo of myself on the second page. Thanks, Ben. But I thought I would mention it because this kind of career trajectory, or at least weird pathway of a career, I think is quite interesting. About sort of 7 years ago, I was very much a part of a group of people that we look at as doing a lot of bad stuff towards nature. Today, I'm in a very different group. But my perspective of that first group is probably different to a large number of outsiders thinking and leveraging their assumptions about how everyone behaves in different groups. So I thought I would just break this up to say that, change can happen, and sometimes through the weirdest ways. And for me, it was snakes, of all things. And this photo here is really an example of how you can get it wrong when you jump and you think you know things and you leverage your assumptions. I'm a really passionate snake nerd. I thought that I could really help fix human wildlife or human venomous snake coexistence simply by buying up a large number of boots and distributing them in areas of high conflict potential. I thought, well, I'll do my master's research around this and I'll prove this, and I'll raise funds and I'll, distribute the boots, and that'll be great, and I'll fix the whole thing. A nice collaboration with Hunter Wellies or something. And when I actually got to the site, and when I got to the landscape, and when I spoke to the people, I realized that they were, heavily associated bare feet walkers. The kind of livelihood that they had was in paddy fields. That's a lot of water to be wading through in boots. It won't work very well. And all I heard was that, these solutions is just so amazingly disconnected to the reality on the ground. And of course, they're totally right. And it brings to me, finance is about scale fundamentally, but if you build a house on a wobbly foundation, it's not going to last for very long, and it's probably going to do more damage than good. So I wanted to ground the finance I'm about to go and talk about in the importance of starting where it matters. If you don't start where it matters with the relevant insights and relevant perspectives, you're going to end up scaling things that may not work. If they do work, it'll be for a short period of time and very expensive. It may even burn the bridge for someone to do a better job right after you, and really affect the trust. So I think with all the discussion and the amazing presenters that we've had before, we don't really need much scene setting. We're all very aware of the scene. But as a big three, land use change, how we use the land, how humans exist on Earth is affecting wildlife. And despite the international value of some wildlife, we've spoken about a lot of charismatic species today: grizzly bears, wolves, in my case, lions, other big cats. They're carrying a lot of costs to local communities. Again, I thought Ben's talk was particularly insightful from this, that coexistence is messy. It is not beautiful at times. Just go there and see it. Feel the pain mixed with the real value. It's a real trade-off, and it's complicated to work through. And alongside efforts to reduce the negative impact that we have on wildlife, we also have to raise capital in order to fund the amazing work that so many people in this room are directly, indirectly engaged with, which is essential. And I put some numbers up here on the right-hand side, and they're both a little bit of finger in the air, but they generally demonstrate towards the fact we don't have enough money to really affect these changes. The top one there is the estimated funding gap to reverse biodiversity loss. That's annual figure. Scary, I know. And the one below is the target 19, for kind of raising additional capital towards biodiversity. This is what we hope is each year from 2030. And I kind of wanted to ground this in the wider picture of the global biodiversity framework. I don't know about you, but even when I'm in this space listening to all these talks all day, I can be muddled. I can be confused. It feels like on one hand, we have to focus on doing less bad. On the other hand, it's actually about doing more good. The truth is it's about reconciling both of these competing ideas and still functioning. It's about still moving forward, to kind of paraphrase F. Scott Fitzgerald. And really what I wanted to get to here is the fact that it's the double ticket. And even though today we're going to be focusing on the positive impacts, you could probably argue that reducing the negative ones are just, if not far more important in terms of capital flows. So when we go through the talk today talking about increasing the positive impacts, bear in mind that it's a balance. Bear in mind that it's not straightforward. And bear in mind that it's about these kinds of conversations where we can bring that together under a holistic umbrella. And to start off with my sort of innovation theme, I wanted to bring you directly to my field site in Tanzania. I have some other colleagues of mine that work for the same NGO across Kenya and Tanzania, Lion Landscapes. This is, of course, the group that's founded by Amy Dickman and Elaine Cottrell. And they are bringing incentivizing conservation to a space with high conflict. This is a space where lions, leopards, hyenas are shaping how people are existing in that landscape. And what they try and do is incredibly complicated. The approach is multifaceted. I won't even begin, but it has two primary prongs. And I think that we can really grapple with. It's enhancing the value, the real value of nature in how you interact with it, at the same time as reducing the costs of presence in the land. It's both at the same time. And the beauty of this intervention is it's completely co-designed. This is not landing with a great plan that works on paper, rolling it out, enforcing it. It's turning up, recognizing, oh, there seems to be an issue here. Engaging the community. What issues do you see? What are your issues? What is the human relationship with nature in this landscape? What would you do about it? How can we leverage it? How can we support you through this? And then through that process, we offer some kind of a structure and we say, this is what we're thinking. We're thinking it's about a 12-month contract. Do you want to give it a go? And at the beginning, it was a unanimous no. Absolute hard rejection. I think Amy and Elaine were spending 2 years in this part around the Selous Game Reserve and Nyeri National Park in Tanzania with huge amounts of conflict taking place, trying to convince that we're here to help, we can scale solutions. Hard rejection. Then one community group said, actually, you've been here long enough, we have some trust, the big T word, essential in conservation, we're willing to give it a go. Now there are 6 villages, the other 5 came to us after the first one, and we're working through what a community camera trap project could look like. And in a really, really quick way, it's effectively the community choose where to distribute camera traps on their area of the land. They capture photos of amazing wildlife. They live right along the periphery to the protected areas, the gaps in the fingers from Chip's earlier talk. And they sort of, they feel the value of the wildlife because each 3 months we share all of the photos that we capture. They're linked to points, which equate to very real dollars. And then they decide how they want those things to be used. In addition to that, there's also capture of positive conservation behaviors. If you are designing bomas for your cattle, if you are reporting conflict events, if you are using extra measures to mitigate wildlife coming to your livestock at night, like the sort of even reflective CDs, around where you keep your livestock, extra points. And then against the baseline, disincentives for poisoning critically, this is a massive issue for us in the area, but also snaring. Positive points with the reporting of snares. This is the kind of deal. And I wanted to kind of mention that the benefits, what happens to the money, it's not just money that goes out directly. It's about offering a suite of different benefits. Everyone is so different. Their relationships to livestock, to the land is so different. We offer a whole range of different tools, from schooling to access to park trips, to guidance, to subsidized market support, a whole range of pieces, none more popular than the film night that takes place every single month. But I thought I'd just run through some photos from the camera trap to try and demonstrate, how the value is associated. So you can see on the, right-hand side, many different wild dogs. Each dog contributes towards a point, so 340,000 points equates to an awful lot of money. This can go towards developing different toilets in the community. It can be new desks for schools. It could be functionally whatever the community chooses, but also prey. The relationship is important, not just a value one. They're kind of reliant on each other. Lions need to have that natural prey, so the community also has to feel the value from having there too. Mind you, it doesn't always work quite so well. Yeah, I bet you're glad it's not a video. But we also capture other things too. Some things like, we really don't want to see like snared animals. Others are, really high value wildlife in the area that otherwise would have gone to trade markets. There's a funny story about someone catching a pangolin. They're going to the market, and then one of his friends heard along the way and said, "Oh, what are you doing? These are worth so many points on the camera trap." And they stopped the car, reversed, and then they took the pangolin and walked it back and forth across the camera to get as many points as possible. We had to discuss what the real value of that intervention was. But now we talked a little bit about the local innovation. With the final 5 minutes, I'll try and wrap up how this can work at scale, which is kind of also where I come into this. This graphic is from a very recent paper that we have in review, which tries to break down and tries to build a bridge between the conservationists and ecologists and the financiers. They basically don't talk the same language, and there's enough bias there to make it a very frosty meeting when they do take place. So we're trying to put out a typology for how you can raise different money for the conservation and restoration interventions. And then critically, from a financial perspective, how can you derive revenue from what you do? How can you really elevate that value? And it isn't just important for the conservation interventions, it's important for fundraising. The more value you can demonstrate, the easier it is to get extra funds. So alongside other regulation, other policy, this isn't the tool in the toolkit. However, there are challenges. We know that investments in nature finance, they need to be big, they need to be with profit, or they won't work. And nature markets are highly volatile, not what you would usually use to get bigger investment attraction. They're often underpinned by the quality of the work, and in an outcomes-based metric, that's the quality of the evaluation of the intervention. We're speaking a lot about that today. And then real conservation is also underpinned by the real community value. So we can't forget that as we go through our development, go through our scaling. The number of trade-offs here is in a recent report we did for WWF around what a good nature market could look like. We're a bit tight for time, so I'll run through these quite quickly. But effectively, a value mismatch would be the first one that I'd run through, where you have investments that demonstrate real value, the quality of the metrics used, the quality and the evaluation of the outcome are a little bit suspect. We challenge them quite a lot. So what does it really mean when we say that we're investing in nature? How can we make sure that we nail the framework, nail the evaluation, and give confidence in the market through confidence in our science? And the more confidence we have in our science, more confident we can talk about it, recognize problems, improve it, and change it. Also, with regards to governance and power sharing, investors demand certainty. I'm sure that in your work, certainty is only achievable in the uncertainty of your project management. So how can you manage that? Well, only by building solutions that are locally useful, that they really need, that flex with the needs and the demands of your core user group. And then also a bit of a temporal mismatch and power imbalances by how long does it take to get returns? How long do you have to work there to build trust? Should you do it? You can't do it, right? If the communities are fundamentally rejecting, so it's a really unattractive investment proposition where you might invest for a year and not make it through. And then how do you distribute that capital? What does it look like? Well, we've thought of this for large carnivores, and it really starts with engaging communities as early as possible, the land owners, the rights holders. And so what do we think is interesting moving forward in the final minute and a half that we have here? These are just some ideas that we have, and they by a far way don't demonstrate all that we're thinking about. But for a long time, conservation operated without engaged local communities, just about the wildlife. It's for the wildlife, and we had that wrong, and we made the change. Now we're going to have another different stakeholder group that we're not really engaging. We have to engage these people. How we do it in a way that doesn't offend, how we disagree in a way that doesn't bring polarization. Essential for us. How do we evaluate our projects in a way that brings security, but not just quantitative assessments, also qualitative assessments, getting to that rich truth behind our interventions? And how do we pair up different projects with the right kind of support so we don't get round, plug, square, hole kind of mismatches? We're becoming really interested in this. But for now, that's it from me. Thank you so much. I know that we're nearly towards the end of the day, but thank you very much. It's been great.
Thank you, Harrison. You don't always hear talks about the confluence of finance and wildlife like that. And next up, Francesca Maruco. Hopefully I said that. If I didn't, she can correct me. She's an associate professor in zoology at the University of Torino in the Department of Life Sciences and Systems Biology, and has a long experience with large carnivores. She has in fact been studying them for 30 years between the Alps and North America, with a particular focus on coexistence. She's published in numerous scientific articles all over the world. She's published books and is editor and reviewer of scientific journals. She's the scientific coordinator of the Life Wolf Alps EU project, Life Wild Wolf, and Coco Horizon project on developing coexistence, and also the contact person on the subject for the Ministry of the Environment in Italy and the Ministry of Ecological Transition in France. Francesca, welcome.
All right. So thanks a lot for the invitation to be here today. And we have the hard task to be the last one of the day. We were just saying with Camila how tough it is for students to be concentrated all day. So we are on the other side today. So very, very tough. So thanks for holding on. I will talk about wolves in the Alps. I've been studying and working on this subject for the last 30 years. And I will try to wrap up what we did, taking into account mainly the challenges we had and what we see for the future as well in terms of coexistence, taking into consideration that we really are in one of the most anthropized mountains of Europe and of the world, I think. So here, the Alps, they can look like the Rocky Mountains a little bit. There are some key differences though. It's a good habitat for wolves, for large carnivores, forests, prey, it's full of prey, so very, very nice for them, and that's probably how they see this. But let's see at the challenges. First one, this is how it is. So the Alps are divided within 7 countries. So when we have to deal, with just one population and dealing with conservation, management of just one population and try to treat it like that, that means that 7 countries with different languages, different cultures, strong personality have to work together. So can you imagine this? I have so many stories of, meetings with Italians, people from Switzerland and France, and arguing together. I mean, it's very challenging there. But we made it through. How? I will get there. Second big challenge. Look at that. You were talking about people here in 2065. Okay, so we have lots of people. I think India too, so Jala, we're talking about that as well. So that's okay, kind of like the population density that we have in Italy, okay? 200 people per square kilometer. Okay, I was looking at the Wyoming one, okay? So you are talking about having lots of people here? Okay, so we are probably, you can look at us with lots of hope because we are making it, okay? So there is hope there, okay? So we have to deal with lots of people, with lots of, human activities around. It is challenging. When we talk about predator-prey dynamics, actually, we talk about predator-prey human activity dynamics. And pretty much predator-prey dynamics survive in an environment which is totally human-dominated. So that's what we study. And I heard about this a lot, the Endangered Species Act. I think what's different, we have the Habitat Directive, which is, let's say, the masterpiece of natural legislation in Europe. Also in the Habitat Directive, human activities are considered totally part of the ecosystem. So that's probably the main difference. We were discussing also with Temple, right, that you are working on this. And that's the difference is right there already. But we have lots of fragmentation also in terms of protection. So in Europe, we have these 2 big pieces of legislation, the Habitat Directive and Berne Convention. And now, exactly, we have, for some reasons, a downlisting of the wolf from those, the Habitat Directive and the Berne Convention. So these are the new challenges we have in front of us, how to deal with this in a fragmented, also Europe from a management point of view. On the other hand, we are asked to work at the population level for large carnivores. So in Europe, the European Commissions ask us to take care of the large carnivore population as unique population over the different countries. So you can see the challenges we had over the years right there, okay? And no matter what, the large carnivores are doing great in Europe. It's a good period. They are increasing no matter what, in distribution, in population size. Wolves first. So it's a good recovery, and there has not been any reintroduction. It's totally natural. So I think this is hope for you, right? So I will go through what we had to deal over these years with 3 minutes on the monitoring system, 3 minutes on the project we had for conservation, and I will end with communication. I will not talk too much about, wildlife ecology papers and that kind of stuff. So first of all, how did we start it? So in the Alps, there is a pointer there, I think. Which one it is? Where is the pointer, Okay, anyway, in the Alps, it was, wolves have been extirpated. So the wolf population remained just in the south part of Italy, central south part of Italy. And from there, many reasons. In the 1990s, at the end of the 1990s, the population kind of naturally recolonized the Apennines and reached once again the Alps, okay? We are talking about the Alps. Look at this. The first packs have transboundary. Where is the pointer? I need that. I'm doing a mess. Okay. Is the green arrow at the top? Okay, thank you. So you can see here that the first pack had already transboundary packs between Italy and France. So we soon had to work together. Italy and France together started the Wolf Alpine Group, which was a group that met every single year to trying to join data and monitoring information. Then the population expanded, more packs. You see 2003, 2004, we start working on that, many publications out of that. 2011 and 12, the population kept increasing. So we start working with Switzerland too, because as you can see, we had the first pack there. And this first, we call it a stochastic event, because a wolf dispersed from Slovenia and arrived here in Verona and met a female wolf from the Italian Alps. And here the first couple, guess how they were called? Romeo and Juliet, right there. So anyway, that was loud. And that really kind of made the population going faster in distribution expansion. We had to expand our group. But what happened over the years is that this group of people became friends. And I think to make, transboundary collaboration, people that work together, we need these meetings. We need to know each other. We need to start trusting each other, because at that point, we write projects together. We work together. And it takes time. It has been a long journey, this one, of friendships, I have to say, between the different countries. And the walls keep expanding. We were assisting this. I wouldn't say that it's a conservation success. I think we were assisting this natural recolonization and try, to solve conflict on the way. Now, here we are. There is a very solid population on the western part of the Alps between Italy and France. And from that single pack and this other single pack, the population expanded toward the east central part. All right, so it's an increased population. For sure, it will plateau on the west side pretty soon. And that's what we have. This is the last distribution map we had. And the challenge we have now that we are questioning as a group is, how are we going to document decreasings if that will occur? Because it's very tough when they are totally distributed everywhere. So that's something else. At that point, I want to go to the real core of coexistence, which is working together and solving conflicts. And that usually needs money. So as a group, we started writing projects. And that was the best, because since we got to know each other, we said, okay, let's go on with this. And so we have in Europe this program, which is called the LIFE program, which is financial way for supporting species and habitat conservation in Europe, has a big budget, together also with the Horizon project. And so in these projects, you have to present projects with partners from multiple states. It was perfect. So we got the first Life Wolf Alps project. We got an award for this. You can see the budget. We got a second one, the Life Wolf Alps EU project, where the main goal was to develop coordinated actions among the 7 countries to improve wolf-human coexistence at the alpine population level. And I cannot talk too much about this. I mean, we did so much stuff. But my main message is that we could really extend our starting friendship within partners that were just, wildlife biologists to many more supporters working on other fields within these projects, because these projects work at 360 degrees, not just on ecology. And this project worked very well. We had many, many successes. Now we have this other one, which is a Life Wild Wolf project, which deals mainly with wolves expanding in urbanized area, because that's our new challenge. Together with this project, which is called Co-Creating Coexistence, which just started, it's 1 year, that interests a wider area in Europe, but still the Alps, where we are really working in a multidisciplinary team, more than ever before, I would say. So that's kind of where we are going. I think projects are great because they force us to work together in common goals, deadlines, products, and so much. And this has been a very long journey for me because it started 15 years ago. The hurt of conflict managers, of course, is everywhere, always the livestock, the conflict with livestock. Within the Life Wolf Alps EU, we work on that a lot, and we develop solutions that work very well over the 4 states, the 5 states in the Alps, and we develop best practices. I cannot go too much into this, but we work also in decreasing poaching. We also had our anti-poisoning dog teams. Poisoning is the bad thing that we have in the Alps for wolves that affect many things, many species, and these dogs are super effective. And then we work with hunters on the predator-prey hunting relationships, as well as, this is a big challenge we have also, to control hybridization with dogs, domestic dogs. Finally, just a few more minutes, communication. Those projects force us to work on communication. It's a mandate. If you get these European projects, at least 30% or 40% of the budget has to go there. And usually we are not very good on that, and we were not. So we have been forced to work with professionals in the communication aspect, and that's a big thing. What we got is that we really had to work on effective communication, really to help the society to transform towards coexistence. And we didn't talk about wolves at the center. We talk about, ecosystems, human-dominating ecosystems, where wolves are part of it. That's the big communication there. And we work with stakeholders, the haters and lovers. Of course, they are part of the game all the time. But we learned that we had to focus also on the silent and doubtful majority, which often we forget about it. And instead, we develop very strong programs to go there and try to communicate and work with the majority of the people there. We try to understand media attitudes. We have 2 papers that are in review now that analyze the media attitudes over the last 15 years and see what affects that. That's pretty interesting. Of course, participatory approach, that's the top of the list, working with stakeholders and everybody. But my last message, and I'm almost done, is that the network we built within this project, that what made the difference. I think everybody who has been involved is so passionate in what they do, no matter the field they come from. And if everybody feels the project as something that belongs to them, everybody communicate about that, pass correct information. And this is just the number of people that have been involved in one of the projects, the Life WildCRU. So for me, the key to long-term coexistence is really networking and multidisciplinarity. That was really what made the difference for us. So thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Francesca. That was great. So neat to see the maps of numbers of wolves expanding like that. And I will never forget Romeo and Juliet coming together. And last but certainly not least, we have Mariana Montoya, who is a Peruvian biologist with over 25 years of experience in biodiversity conservation, natural resource management, and environmental policy in Latin America. Her research focuses on sustainability of indigenous social ecological systems in the Peruvian Amazon. Since 2013, she has served as country director for the Wildlife Conservation Society in Peru, where she leads a team of professionals working at the intersection of science, policy, and community empowerment for conservation in Peru. Previously, she held key roles at WWF Peru and the National Institute of Natural Resources, contributing to national conservation policies and the management of protected areas. Mariana.
Which one is the All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Temple, and all the organizers for inviting me here and be able to learn from all of you. So let me take you to the Amazon, to the northern Peruvian Amazon, where I'm going to be telling you this story about the work we've been doing in this area for more than 3 decades already, which started with really a overexploitation regime, and now we are looking at the benefits that people have been having with based on wildlife, based on the use of sustainable use of wildlife, and coexisting really with all the species that they have in the region. So as many parts in the Amazon, in this area, overexploitation was like the main way of living for people. For many reasons, they hunted for, of course, for their own meat, for their own subsistence, but also for the live pet market, skins, different uses of wildlife, no, and without any care, and it was illegal, but nobody really did anything about that. It was really, and it's still in some parts very common to see these kind of exhibitions in the markets for different reasons, as I said. So back in the 90s, we start working with these communities in this part of the Amazon, and we start together with them recording their activity, recording how much they were hunting, how much they were fishing, where and who were doing what kind of species they were hunting, to start understanding what was going on, who were going into their territories, and because not only them were hunting, they were all outsiders also going into their territories. So after we started understanding together what was going on with their wildlife and the hunting and the fisheries, they decided to self-organize with our support and start also looking for ways of taking care of their territory, taking care of their lands, doing patrolling, doing vigilance, control, without any payment. This area, up to now, they don't have park guards. It's local people that really do the patrolling, take care of their land. They have their control, control posts, where they stay, they rotate the vigilance, and just now for the last maybe 4 years, the regional government is supporting them with boats or some food, but it's really done by them directly and without any financial support. So based on how they started on the monitoring, and then after deciding that they want to control this area, they also decided that they want to conserve the larger territory. And so in 2006, around that area, around that time, they decided to want to create a protected area. And so they created this large protected area, which is about 4,000 square kilometers, approximately, a little bit more. So the communities are outside the protected area. This is the buffer zone, this other green, and this is the protected area that they really push for it. And finally, the government recognized it, because the idea was to have this source sink model, no, where they can hunt in their community lands, but you have like the source of the wildlife in the protected area, no? The patrolling they do in their communities, but also inside the protected area. So after this was created, they really were in charge of co-managing. Although it says co-management, it was really managed by them, by the local communities around these areas. And so they organize themselves. They organize not only by each community, but the different communities form the management committee for the protected areas. And they've been we've been supporting this process to prepare the different management plans every 5 years. And I copied here only a couple of objectives of the management plans. So you can see that the management plan is really a territorial approach to their lands. And it's not only the protected area, but it says, of course, maintaining population of species that they consume, that they fish or hunt, but also those species that nowadays they don't hunt, that they know that are threatened, that they know that don't tolerate that much hunting. So they want to conserve like species like tapirs, the wackery monkey, jaguars, and other species. But also they have objectives where they also want to benefit the families and the communities that live around this protected area. So all this work is really to conserve these lands, but also to receive a benefit, because their livelihoods are really based on the wildlife they use. There's no other activities, just small farming, but it's basically fishing, hunting. Also, they do craft from palm fibers and different activities. So part of this, part of this work was also people starting to organize themselves in sense of having hunting agreements. Even before having like management plans, or even before the protected area was created, they decided to have hunting communal agreements where they agree to what they can hunt, what they can't hunt. And so, for example, these are in fact, there are 5 species that they can hunt: 2 different peccaries, 2 different deers, and this rodent, which is called paca. And they establish how many animals they can have. They can hunt per families, where they can hunt them, and things like that. They cannot hunt species like the monkeys and jaguars and all the ones that before they were hunted for the illegal trade. The same happened with fisheries. They also established their zoning, the fishing communal agreements, where they established the quotas, minimum sizes of catch, the best practices for fishing, and everything was done really without the intervention of the authorities. It was done with like technical support from organizations as WCS and others, but really was led by them. Nobody was paying them for these kind of things. It was really assisting them and providing the information they need to establish all these agreements. So, and part of their commitments and responsibilities that they assume as being part of the protected area management and the work that they were doing, they also not only recorded how much they were hunting or fishing, but also how much they comply with their own agreements. So they start monitoring their compliance, start monitoring the hunting or fishing activity. And we could see, analyzing, that during the 90s, with their own recording, they were still hunting different like threatened species, the monkeys and cats and all these other species. But over the years, they have been reduced that hunting, and they are now only hunting the paca, which is this rodent, which is really good meat for restaurants and for local people. And this has been all led by their own monitoring and recording system. But after some years, we were able to start doing the monitoring with like occupancy modeling in the entire area as a way of assessing the effectiveness of these local agreements. And we were able to see back in 2016, and this is just one example with the peccaries, but we have this information for the different species that they hunt, but also for the ones that are not hunted, where we could see that inside the protected area, the occupancy of the peccaries in this case were really good. But in communities without hunting agreements, as in this case, it was really small, like 10% of occupancy for the peccaries. And in the ones with the communities with agreements weren't so bad, but still less occupancy than inside the protected area, which of course made sense. So after that, and then the new management plan, and we reinforce and we work with them so to reinforce the agreements and the responsibilities. And we did the same monitoring, same assessment back in 2021. And we could see how managing the peccaries, really implementing community agreements, they were able to recover or to improve the occupancy of all of these species in all the different places in the communities, but and maintain the status of the peccaries inside the protected areas. No? And that was the same case with the other species that they were hunting. So after all these years these people have been really taking care of their communities, of their biodiversity, of the protected area, they were already using or selling their wildlife and their meat, but to the local market without really thinking much on the quality or the sanitary conditions. So we were able to start implementing those trainings and also infrastructure or the cold chain so that these communities could really have a more commercial use of the wildlife and the fisheries. And so 2 years ago or 3 years ago, they were able to really improve the way they were not only processing the meat, but really taking care of the cold chain for the meat and the fish. And now they have signed, the communities have signed directly agreements with local restaurants in Iquitos, which is the largest capital in the Amazon of Peru. This is the main city, the closest city that they have here. Is like 3 or 4 hours by boat, where they really bring in these coolers their meat and their fish directly to the restaurants, who have also committed to only buy sustainable managed resources of these 4 or 5 species and the fish. These restaurants before in the past bought the illegal or in the market, whatever they found, because in this city in Iquitos, they eat a lot of wild meat, but it was illegal, unsustainable, and who knows about sanitary conditions. But today they have committed also to only buy from these communities. It's the same with the fish. And in both cases, the income has increased because of the quality and the better prices that the restaurants are paying for them. No? So I would just to finalize, because I only have a few minutes more, like the main strategies that we have been implementing over many years now. And one of it has been really having this landscape approach, like taking care not only of the species in different places or the community, but really taking care of larger areas to have this conserved habitat that will allow for healthy population of these species assemblages, not only a few species, but really understanding the complete picture. Co-management has been like super, super important because it's their territory, their land. Most of them are indigenous people, so has been really key in the process. This possibility of coexistence today has been really impossible because of the no-killing agreements, but because they're having benefits from hunting and fishing and other activities, but committing to not kill other species that don't tolerate or that are threatened species in these cases. No? Long-term monitoring has been also very, very important, and not only like complex and too scientific monitoring. We started with just recording what they do, recording the fisheries, recording the hunting, so that they can see what they were doing, they can self-assess how they were doing their activities. And now, more and more, we've been complementing with occupancy modeling, the camera traps, and all that is much more expensive, but we have done it also with them so that they can compare science and local knowledge, and we are really very aligned. The results are very similar, and the trends they can see is really based on what they were doing. No? All of that has helped really to have a governance system in place. This is also critical, and also the monitoring for the governance system has been really important to this self-organization and to generate tangible benefits. No? And this is the final slide. The challenges are many, but I would like to emphasize these generational changes. Young people now, they are not that willing to stay in the communities or to do the patrolling. They really want to believe in the city. So we are concerned about that. Nature has limits. All these restaurants now, every restaurant wants to buy wild meat and fish from these communities. That's not possible. There's quotas, there's a limit. There's no way they can sell more. But this generates also a lot of expectations, so that we always need to look for other alternatives that are also sustainable. And so I would say that the main lessons from this work with the communities is that it has to be community-led. They need to have the information, the monitoring, be really empowered to monitor, to co-manage their areas, and feel that they can really benefit from what they do. And I leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mariana. We have a few minutes here before the end for questions. Does anybody have any questions?
Hi, I was just wondering, particularly in Peru, but maybe for everyone, whether there's also tourism either as pressure or as possibility and promise for another form of financial flows.
Yes, there's tourism in this area, and it's both. In some cases, has been an opportunity to also generate jobs for local people as guides, but also has generated conflicts because these companies don't want to see people hunting or fishing because they say they are the tourists don't like to see people hunting or fishing in a protected area. So sometimes it's difficult to explain that, but it's both, and it's a matter of really working with the tourism sector to really, so that they can understand what is wildlife management or fisheries management that can be used and can be sustainable. No? Yes. Yes. Sure, yes.
Okay.
Shouldn't be like that. But what happens is that the regional government here, because it's a protected area managed by the subnational government, it's not a national protected area. And since its creation, they really never supported this process or provide any money. But they have now a new project. The first time they have a project and have money to protect these areas in different places in the region. And what happened is that before, for example, the management committee, they organized their own agenda. The community member were the president of the management committee. They were really in charge, the communities. But now that the government has the money, they want to pay the people for patrolling. They want to set the agenda for the management committee. They want now to decide what to do in this protected area. And so now the local people, the local communities are feeling that now they don't have much authority. They feel it's in power. They felt that in the past they had much more to say or much more authority to do what they have been doing. But now that the authority the regional government has the money, they want to pay for things that in the past were done by the communities because they want to. And so it has been creating this tension and basically the disempowerment of the community. No?
I have a question for Francesca. You talked a little bit about tracking media attitudes. I wondered what you're able to do with that information and how you kind of collect that.
All right. This has been a challenging study. I had a PhD student that is working with that. Together with other scientists in Europe, pretty much he used also the artificial intelligence to record all the media articles over the last 20 years. And then we had a way to kind of evaluate the attitude of the article based on 5 independent readers for every article. And then based on that, we also kind of trained the artificial intelligence to kind of score all the media. So just that, it has been a long work. Based on that, then we had different variables that we used to try to see what drove the media articles. And this is a paper that is coming out based on the work of Davide Ravaglia, who is my PhD student. And it turns out that media, it's complex, but briefly, media attitude are driven as for a certain amount by hard facts, so depredations, number of wolves, new recolonization, but taking care of that kind of variability, like the last part of the variability was actually driven also by political election moments. So that was very interesting. You will read that. Okay. Thank you, Temple.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Singer. I'm with the Jackson Hole Conservation Alliance. And my question is for Lesli. So when we talk about managing wildlife, really talking about managing people and large landscapes. And with private landowners, especially in Teton County, I think Mark Newcomb said that we have 3% of private land, but that private land, although it sounds like a very small percentage, is actually really critical wildlife habitat. And as we all know, it's highly sought after, it's very expensive, and there's endless McMansions popping up. So I have a couple of questions, actually. Okay, well, they're related. Is that okay? No. Well, I'll get specific here. So for one example, the Mead Ranch is a really iconic historical ranch in Spring Gulch area, views of the Tetons. The family has been there for generations. They have a cattle ranch. They've decided to kind of pivot. They have a conservation easement on some of their property, but they're selling off a lot of the rest. So a couple issues here. Family subdivisions, that could potentially go awry? Is that something that you're focusing on? Also, the lands that are being sold off and subdivided for non-family members, for the McMansions that are popping up in that valley, what can be done to protect that land from being developed?
Yeah, I
Thank
mean,
you.
I think that's the challenge of our day, right? Especially in a place like this where the land values are just astronomical, right? We don't have the money in the conservation community to buy that out, right? To put easements on all of it, to create the incentives that would equal other land uses. And so this is what we're seeing everywhere in the West. And the challenge, of course, is that in the absence of being able to have the means to do something economically, we default to regulatory approaches. We say you can't divide it. And that has, that exerts a negative pressure as well on those lands. And it's tough because those are investments. Those are, family assets. Those are financial assets that just like your 401ks or anything else that people have invested in over time. And to regulate that and say, well, now because it serves this other purpose, we're going to take it away. We're going to devalue it or whatever. That's unjust. That creates all kinds of conflicts as well too. So it's really a challenge that we don't have a total solution to. I think there's some balance between thoughtful land use planning and zoning that involves the landowners in those conversations, because it's a double-edged sword. It can be positive and negative. So I think it's about a community coming together to try to find those solutions. But then it's also about creating more economic support for keeping those lands open. What are those incentives that we can build up that are actually meaningful to start discouraging some of that subdivision? So I'm sorry, I wish I had the answer. If I did, we wouldn't maybe all need to be sitting here today. I guess that's kind of an inadequate answer for you, but that's the challenge that's in front of us. Yeah, we got to incentivize keeping these lands open, but we also have to respect that these are businesses and investments. And as one of our ranch members said to me once, you can't expect ranchers to operate outside of capitalism. And I thought that was a good observation.
Great. That is it for time. So thank you all so much. This was really amazing.